whiskey river, don't run dry.
I never heard it. Is that Justin Bieber?
Hank Jr.
I'm pretty sure you leaked it on the last pod, and it won't come as a surprise anyways when we drop this, per the title of the video, but we read...
Dead giveaway.
It was a dead giveaway. And in the last, I think immediately in the last pod, you said something about Will of the Many anyway, so it was a nice harbinger of what was to come. But here it is, ladies and gentlemen, The Will of the Many by the beloved, I don't know anything about him.
James Islington.
Is it Islington or
I think it's Islington. Okay. And the OG cover, which is so much better than the new cover.
Well, I have a hot take. At first, I thought that this cover... I will say this seems more original.
Yeah.
I've never seen a fantasy cover like that. However, the new cover does seem a little bit more on brand with the book itself.
Well, yeah. I mean, it gives you an actual illustration of what you're looking at. I mean, it has one of the
Transvect
pyramids, and it has one Transvect in it.
So I mean, but then it makes it feel more sci-fi.
Yeah, I don't know.
Although this book has some sci-fi elements,
I would consider it,
but it has a magic system. So I mean,
I'm fairly sci-fi.
Fairly sci-fi. Well, that's the Red Rising in it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what do you? We heard that this was a great combination of some of our favorite books, Name of the Wind and Red Rising. What do you think about that?
I would agree. Yeah, I would say you get elements of Quoth for sure, and the barbarism of Viz and his, he is not, I don't think I would say overpowered, if that OP versus plot armor argument that we always have, but I would say he's ruthless, he comes out on top. It seems like he wins. And an example of that would be like in the early fights in the theater, his ability to just ground and pound that Sextus.
Yeah.
Or when he's in that Armistice or whatever, fighting that other student, and he gets over the top of him and is bashing his head in.
Yeah.
Like, he just is ruthless.
Yeah,
like,
I would consider Viz having plot armor versus being OP because... he's not like, he gets tossed all the time.
Yeah. And then the Red Rising bit, you get a lot of that. Honestly, you have a hierarchy, this dominant structure. You have someone, the difference is though, Darrow is starting off at the bottom of the structure where Viz was a prince, but then he gets conquered, so he effectively does start off at the bottom.
I mean,
as an orphan.
Yeah, as an orphan, and then when he gets to the academy, he's at the bottom of the totem pole, and whereas Darrow kind of starts at the institute. I think it was the institute where he's kind of bottom of the totem pole. So, and then even in Red Rising, the entire first book is you have the institute and the academy to set you up for the rest of the books.
Yeah,
where
and,
you end
and how
there.
you perform dictates. Who you're able to like study
associate
under.
with, yeah.
And he got the arch governor, I think.
Yeah,
What's his
in
name?
Red Rising.
Mustang's dad. But,
Augustus.
Yeah, that's a good memory. But so similar in that regard where he has to prove himself, he has to work himself up the ranks. That dictates his future. So yeah, I think that's a very good combination of those two. But I guess a lot of times when we start these books off, especially this feels a little bit like a one-off in that the second book hasn't been made yet. But do you have a favorite scene?
Yeah. Oh, hands down, my favorite scene is towards the end. There's I don't know, not quite an antagonist, a supporting character who's taking the academy very competitively. And
Belly?
Belly is very standoffish, and they play Foundations, which in my mind is just chess. I'm envisioning it being chess. And Belly has some dirt on Viz's best friend. And
Calidus.
Yeah, Calidus. And when they play, he has never played Foundations before because he doesn't want to give away that he's really good at it.
He hadn't played it in front of the
students. And so when he plays her, he pretty much sandbags her or hustles her, and he finally, right before he's about to win, he's like, "Look, I will draw this game if you get rid of the blackmail." And so she gives the blackmail back to Calidus, and then he goes,
Psych!
Yeah, psych. I don't want to do this, but I am.
I'm going to teach you a lesson.
Checkmate, baby.
Ho.
God, and he just whispers in her ear, and
dirty
he
hoe.
goes, "You suck."
Yeah, that was a great
That's
scene,
a
wasn't it?
sick scene,
Well, that's
man.
an example of something Darrow would do.
Yeah.
Ruthless. And
And-
maybe even something Quoth would
Well,
do.
and I think it goes, it ties into the overall themes of this book, where we talked about this early or over a phone call, that one of our gripes is that you're not emotionally tied to Viz enough where, you're like, is he really the good guy? Because he's always in these moral and ethical dilemmas, and he just does what he's told. And I think that's one of those first scenes where he finally makes his own decision to do something versus, being forced to do something.
Well, I will say it demonstrates loyalty towards Calidus, which I really
Right.
liked. And the fact that it is, even though he's surrounded by young, peers of his that are high up in this hierarchy and that will be seating and, doing all of the things that he's against. These are technically his adversaries, right? Like he is a mole in this system and shouldn't be getting close to these people. But just like Red Rising, it's like how Darrow got close to the Golds and Severo and Mustang and all of them. It's like you can't help but find the humanity in everyone, right? So it's a blurry, these lines are blurred. But yeah, I think that was a really good scene. I think what
was your favorite scene?
This was such a simple scene, and I don't know that this is my favorite. I didn't really come prepared with that, with an answer to that. No one scene super stands out to me per se as being my absolute favorite, but I liked when I found out that Sedosha was actually Relucia.
Oh, yeah.
That was pretty cool. When she walked in, that really surprised me. And he's like, what?
They're like at a funeral, pretty much.
Yeah, they were at that festival of ancestors. I thought that was pretty cool. That like really got me. I liked that scene a lot. And then I also liked when he had just jumped off the Transvect and swam in, and I think he had already gone into the maze, or he had gone into the labyrinth basically, and then turned around when he saw Artemides and Artemis dies, and he is on his way out, and he gets confronted by that Alupi pup, or he sees that pup, and he was gonna eat it.
Yeah, it was.
And instead decided to spare it. And I think that's to allude back to what you were mentioning earlier about just not really knowing Viz well enough to like truly feel empathetic for him and his quest. You just didn't feel like you knew him well enough. But in that moment when he decided to spare that pup, it made me feel a little bit more endeared toward him.
I would agree with that.
And so I liked that scene.
And sure enough, that was a pivotal moment in the entire book for the ending. Saving that Alupi.
Is that how you say Alupi?
I don't know. I'd call it Alupi. Alupi?
Alupi. Yeah, it's like a wolf, a big wolf.
Yeah.
A dire wolf.
And so, I think that's probably a good segue is, that Alupi comes back around and pretty much saves Viz 3 or 4 different times.
Well, yes.
And, one of the things that I was thinking about is when Viz is held at knife point by that Anguis, right before he's about to capture the heart of Joven, something in my gut almost felt like, because he can transcend different dimensions pretty much, he can teleport or disappear and apparate or whatever.
Are you talking about that Anguis guy?
Yeah, the Anguis guy that holds him at knife point right before he steals the heart of Joven.
Well, he's wanting him to go and get the heart.
Yeah.
He wants him to become Dominator.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So part of me was like, is this guy also the Alupi?
Well, it's not just a wolf. I mean, it's very clear that animal is personified or controlled by something. Don't you think?
Well, and so where I go back and forth is like, he found that wolf in dire need. And so if it was personified, they wouldn't need that scene to happen. Or maybe the Alupi is just super loyal.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because if the Alupi was trying to help him, they did not need that scene.
Yeah. I had a weird thought. So, and this is playing into the full ending, which is where you learn everything about this world that makes it exciting, in my opinion. The very end is what opens this storyline up to so many possibilities, endless possibilities.
Confusion
it's open,
as well.
It was a little bit confusing, but then, I think, and I did not read the synopsis to book 2, but my interpretation
We will need to read that here then.
Okay, we can read it here. And maybe tell me how far off I am, because I kind of took this as a branch reality situation happening where, and I took some notes in here where it seems like Obiteum and Luceum are actual realms or places. And it seemed to me that in the epilogue that was titled Synchronism, which basically means like simultaneous, synchronized, that when he was in that little pyramid type structure, that iron thing.
Yeah.
And
it was kind of like a cage.
And constant in this little cage type circle, he created a branch reality of himself. And in that branch reality, his consciousness seems to have replicated.
Yes, cloned.
And probably, I assume, has all of the memories and past of Viz, and then is confronted by Caeror. And, Caeror cuts into his arm. So anyways, the reason I bring all that up is, to me, it seems possible.
And you are spot on, by the way.
Okay.
You are spot on, by the way.
That's
that's all in the synopsis on the back of the next book.
Nice. So it's a branch reality. There's a bee.
What the?
He's fine. Let him be.
That's a problem. That's a problem.
That's more than one bee in here. I can see where it's coming in up there. It looked like he went right under the brick.
All right.
So, but
noted.
That's a
noted for later.
But so that was my interpretation of what had happened. But as I was reading, I'm like, what's going on? And I was thinking more about synchronism. And so anyways, the reason I bring all of that up is now there's a parallel universe, at least 2. And I don't know whether Viz went to Obiteum or Luceum or what, or if there's a different sort of branch reality that happens in either realm. I'm unsure.
So there's a Viz in each one.
It seems like that.
There's a Viz in each one.
Oh, there is?
So the world that he's in that we've been reading is called Res. And then Luceum...
Which is basically Prime. It seems that's the world that we... Yeah, okay.
It would be called Res. And then Luceum and
It wasn't
Obiteum.
referred to that in the book, though, was it?
No, you find out about that just on the back of the second book.
Oh, okay. Well,
because I was reading through Reddit, like trying to make sense of it, and they're using all these terms, and I'm like, how did you guys figure this out?
I kind of nailed it then.
Yeah, you nailed it totally on
Now, there's a lot of questions, right? Because I want to bring it full circle back to the Alupi pup. So the reason I bring that up is there is ostensibly no Caeror in Res or Prime. There is, however, one in Luceum or Obiteum or wherever Viz was when he cut his arm. So I imagine that if one of those Caeror dies, or at least if the one in Res died, the other ones would die, or there'd be some implication, because when Viz cut his arm in that other realm, it hurt him. It showed up in the other. You know what I mean? So there's consequences.
Well, and this is me reading Reddit. I believe that when you're in the gate, whatever happens to you happens across. But if you're just like in the world, then it wouldn't affect.
So he had to be in that little
when you're in
that circle.
the actual gate.
That circles the gate. So if he were to, when he walked out of that.
But if he died in that gate, he's going to die in all 3.
Well, that does impact my theory a little bit, because I was thinking, is somehow Caeror the Alupi pup? Because he was trying to protect him at the gate, and the only other thing trying to protect Viz out in the Res world is this pup.
Yeah. Well, and that...
Which I don't know how he would be, I don't know how that would exactly work. However, there are Walking Dead type figures. I wonder if you could somehow use will or something to, make the pup do that, or to
it's
shift consciousness. I don't know.
Because when he's at the gate and the Dementors, if you will, are they right before they go into that like hurricane. There's somebody in the room that like stops them, and so that could be Caeror, that could be Viz. I don't really know, but they are
what hurricane.
So when he finally gets out of the gate and he cuts his arm
At the end.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
he's faced with the Dementors, if you will, and then they start spiraling into like a hurricane above the gate because somebody comes in and starts like attacking them,
That's
but
right.
he can't see them.
Okay.
And similar to like that Anguis that holds him at knife point, he's able to, disappear. And when Viz comes out of that, I know we're jumping around here, he's able to sense other people.
Uh-huh.
And so that's probably him now being connected to these other dimensions where these Anguis are maybe interdimensional as well.
Well, that's my question. That was one of the things I was wondering about is in these branch realities, assuming that these are branch realities.
Yes.
And that it's happening at this exact same time. Because obviously there could be...
And that would be the synchronism. So it's obviously all at the same time.
So that's an interesting element of this parallel universe. It's not like, an alternate universe where it could be, fish that can talk, for example, or it could have happened in the past. It doesn't seem like somebody from that branch reality could go into the past of another reality. It's all synced up in the same time.
Correct.
Does that make sense?
Yes, correct.
So if that's the case, and there is a version of Viz and Luceum, for example, that how could that version of him in that other branch reality know what's happening to Viz in this current Res reality and be able to guide him?
Yeah.
To me, it felt like something else was.
Yeah.
And also, I just had a thought. Remember, my biggest question about this whole thing is why Melior Estevan killed himself with Viz's
for
stylus.
sure.
What was going on? He basically leveled an entire stadium of people, mass genocide, thousands and thousands of people, a part of the Anguis, ostensibly. He's using the power of, I don't know, the Cataclysm or something coming from one of those alternate realms. He it made me feel like he was pulling from that and then killed himself.
Yeah.
What would be the benefit of that? Like,
when I was first reading that, she, Sidodia, is that her as an Anguis? Yeah, Sidodia gives him the knife.
well, it's the stylus.
The stylus. She gives him the stylus to essentially go and kill him. And so I got this sense
that was the unspoken thing, but then Viz made it seem like that was not what she was doing, but seemed pretty clear.
She pretty much is like, you're going to want this. I got the sense that Melior knew that he couldn't do what the Anguis wanted to do alone, so he sacrificed himself knowing that it would start this whole journey for Viz to essentially take over the Anguis.
Well, that could be it, but I also wonder... when you die, does something beneficial happen? I guess is my question. Like, could he be the one steering from the beyond those impulses in his brain? I guess is what I was thinking.
Could be.
Because I was like, he has a shared past with Viz. He spared Viz throughout that situation, concocted that whole ruse to basically die what seems like at the gate.
Yeah.
So why would you do that to yourself? He planned all of that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that was the actual gate, but remember Viz got close and he could see into another realm and he saw a pyramid or something.
Yeah, he saw the pyramid and a harbor lined with 100-foot columns, and it was like dark and stormy. Yeah, and so, who knows if that's Luceum or Obiteum, because if you recall, when Viz was at Manor Telemus, that doctor came and showed him those photos and was like, do any of these look familiar to you? And he saw Viz look at the one for too long, and he goes, no, you remembered that. So they must know. They obviously know about this other world.
This other realm. Other realms.
And that was a military doctor. And so... the military certainly is well aware of Luceum and or Obiteum or whatever that place was.
Yeah. So it seems to me that Veridius, the Principalis, he's running this labyrinth for a reason. It seems like it's the narrative's been flipped on his head where we thought he was the antagonist, maybe not so much. And we don't know. It seems like Caeror is not dead. That does seem like potentially they are trying to stop a cataclysm again, because this whole book started because there was a civilization that was completely and utterly wiped out by some sort of power, and this cataclysm could happen again. And it seems to me that they're trying to prevent it.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? And then it seems like the Anguis almost want it to happen.
Yeah, and so that's where
is
I
that
feel
what
like
you gathered
there's
too, or no?
Yeah, and that's where I feel like some of this misdirection is happening, where I could see the Anguis being the good guys, and so
the Anguis being the good guys.
they could be.
See, I saw them being it seems to me like what's their incentive for stewing up all this chaos? Because you have this burgeoning conflict happening between government, religion, and military. And it seems like they have their little dirty hands in this thing and trying to sow chaos. It almost feels like they do not want stability. But I don't know.
Yeah.
But it seems like there's also insurgents in the Anguis,
But
too.
I think the Anguis are obviously, they're going about it in the wrong way, and that's why Vis, says early on in the book that he was sympathizing with the Anguis movement until he realized that they were just brutes and were wiping out whole villages. So, like, the Anguis is trying to take down the hierarchy, and so maybe they're just smart enough to, like, tie themselves to military because they're the ones that can do the most amount of damage from the inside. And so this is kind of a good point where I want to bring up the writing around the gate.
Oh, around the gate.
Around the gate. And so I'm going to read this. It says, "Herein lies the way to Luceum and Obiteum, offered to those who would contest our extinction, ? And if you're at all familiar, a synonym for extinction would be cataclysm. Know that none who accept this task may remain. The burden of togetherness, harmony, he doesn't know, he's like, I don't know which one, so he lands on harmony, but harmony and togetherness would be synonyms and better together, is reserved for the ones who seal the authors. Who are the authors? Are the authors the ones that were pre-Cataclysm having the ruins? The authors of the war from this world. Only he may exceed the hobbled capabilities of this duplication. He and he alone may risk harmony or togetherness to make the great sacrifice." And so that's where you get the first kind of glimpse into being duplication. Exceed the hobbled capabilities of this duplication, ? He and he alone may risk harmony or togetherness to make the great sacrifice. So I sat and tried to make sense of it, but he's questioning some of these words, and if you pick the synonyms and you swap harmony for togetherness, it's more in line with the rest of the book. But I don't have much more sense than that.
Offered to all those who would contest our extinction, who would contest our cataclysm. So, Lucian, herein lies the way to. Something I was wondering is in these branch realities, maybe there is the key to preventing the cataclysm or a. You know what I mean? Like, I wonder, even though it's happening, these are branch realities happening at the same time, but small differences in decision-making could create different futures. Maybe a future where there is not a cataclysm, or a future where maybe they are purposefully, could it make sense that in one of those branch realities, they're pulling from the will of this current reality or something, and maybe that's why they don't want to.
I have no idea.
Yeah,
I have no idea where the.
Well, my thought
that
was
can fall
Veridius wants someone to complete the labyrinth and be able to make it into, because something obviously happens to you when you've gone through it. Viz now is imbued with some sort of either power or capability or sensation that he didn't have before that seems relevant to being able to potentially stop a cataclysm. So,
Right.
like, there's some key that in this other realm
And
that
yeah,
they
in order
need,
to do that, you would have to be in the other realms.
and you have to, yes, exactly. And the only way, for whatever reason, to do that is to get through this labyrinth.
And
But,
on that point, the labyrinth, I don't know.
yeah, I will say this about the labyrinth: it was, it made me feel it was compelling. You know, it was nerve wracking. It did create a lot of suspense. You know, I didn't expect to see Belly in there all mangled up and her torso ripped in half, and
Total goblet of fire.
yeah. So it does feel a little bit like that, right? And So I liked it from that regard, but yeah, he left a lot of questions. But at least we were on the nose in terms of this being some sort of branch reality, and that once you've made it through the gate, how do we know for sure that he was in Luceum and Obiteum? Or just one or the other when he was at that gate?
So in the synchronism, there's 2 epilogues where he's in the gate, and I want to say that those are because each one starts with like the same opening paragraph, and I think that's where it's alluding that he's in both at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, it's kind of, that was a little bit interesting. I mean, it opens up so many possibilities for how, for what where book 2 could go. The other thing I was going to mention along the same train of thought, we don't know that guy's name, but do you remember the guy at the end? You had brought him up
Yeah,
just
the Anguis guy? The knife?
Yeah, where he basically said something about you and I are kin.
Yeah, and so I think
because he saw the arm.
I think he saw the arm, and
so something happens,
and that's how he knew that Viz had gone through the gate
and made it,
because then he like disappears, and so that's how he's kin in the sense of we are now interdimensional.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Maybe interdimensional, but that was interesting too. That Emissa seemed to know, because she stabbed Viz and tried to kill him.
Well,
thinking that, and then he refused to see Emissa.
When she does that, he says that her eyes go black.
Well, she
it was
was
almost
seeding.
like
She was using will.
Oh, I got the sense that she was being possessed.
No. Their eyes go black when they're using will. Because remember, a good example of this is, what's her name? Aqua. Remember when Aqua tries to she thinks that Viz is using will, because how could you possibly be this capable? And then she sets him up by having those 2 guys jump him. And then the teacher, I forget his name, comes and shines a light in his face right away to see if his eyes turn black.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a lot of references when they use...
Oh, yeah, I guess I kind of missed that.
So Emissa's seeding, and I think actually it's even brought up towards the end about how Viz noticed that and was like, you're pulling will.
Yeah.
But no, when she was going to fix his arm, she was initially very happy to see him.
And then I think she saw the writing.
She saw something, maybe the same thing that the Anguis guy saw, because she was going to kill him. Like, she seems to know something that she should not know. She's pulling will as a student, and she seemed to know Viz's secret that he had ran the Labyrinth.
Well, maybe because if you recall, there's another Anguis plant in the academy, and so maybe
ostensibly multiple.
Yes, and
I've thought about that. I was wondering at one point if Calidus was, but maybe you're right. Maybe it's
I thought it was maybe Idem.
Idem?
Because he was like, hey, I cannot help you.
Well, that is weird. He chose not to run.
And he doesn't know that Viz is obviously in it, so maybe he was like, I'm going to have to kill you because of my mission, and so like I'm not going to do that.
You mean when Veridius gave them like their secret, like this is what you get?
No, I thought maybe that Idem, Sidodia was like, oh yeah, you're just going to have to kill everybody, and Idem was like, well, I'm not going to, kill Viz or something.
I don't know. Yeah, that's interesting. Iden did turn down the opportunity to be in his team,
and he was like, "I can't tell you why. I can't do it."
Yeah, so maybe that's what I was thinking when you mentioned that. Like, yeah, there was some line he would have had to have crossed potentially that would have been against what the Anguis wanted him to do, or put him in a compromising position.
Or maybe he needed to do some lurking while the Obiteum was happening, or I don't know.
Yeah, I'm glad he's alive. I was very sad that Calidus wasn't able to pull through.
Yeah.
But then I also wonder, in a book like this, is it possible that who knows what could happen in a world with branch realities?
You're right.
Now, granted,
everything's possible.
My question is this though: do you have to have gone through the gate to? Is it more of a portal than anything? Like, is there another perfect replica of reality with all the same people in it, just a separate? Same timeline, different results, though. Like, maybe you have a version of Calidus that stayed in Class 3.
Yeah.
Or, different things like that. Like, where he's still alive. And the only way to get duplicated or like, to have a branch reality of yourself in more than one realm is to go through the gate.
Well, maybe that's what the pre-Cataclysm weapon is that Melior was able to transcend without the gate. And that's where when Viz went up to him, he was able to see that vision.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's the weapon, is that you don't have to be in the gate to go between realities.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you think there's a possibility too where like these realities know that these realities exist and one of them wants to be supreme?
Yeah, I'm sure.
And maybe that's part of this is like maybe
Because what does Caeror say? He says
at the end?
no, in his note to
Oh.
he says Obitium lost, Luceum unknown, gate still open, more strange pre-cataclysm power, only Veridius knows. So maybe Luceum is the one that's trying to take over or something. Obitium lost. I don't know what
That's
could
cryptic.
be.
That's cryptic. I just realized I took a picture of a page. 352. Res.
Oh yeah. Right.
So
So
I don't-
and that's the
There's a lot in here this might be one of those books that you kind of have to read over when book 2 comes out, because
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot more than meets the eye with this book. And I guess to bring this whole thing full circle, I kept on getting glimpses that I liked, but also kind of felt in the back of my head that maybe I'm missing something. And it
Yeah.
started to come together towards the end for me, at the very end in the epilogue, basically synchronism. When you learn some of that, it just, it was kind of it was a good book. I liked it, but I just never really felt like I was completely in the know with what was going on, which made me feel a little bit unsettled.
Yeah.
Like I was missing something, or I had to like.
And it just took
make
such a
sense?
different it just took such a wild, unexpected turn that like I feel like I went from a fantasy book into a sci-fi book, and I don't know. I didn't love the ending, and partly because I was a little confused, and that's fine. And so like I'm not gonna let that really hinder my rating.
See, I actually thought the ending was the only thing, the main thing that saved it, because I was loving this book at once chapter 20 hit, and I was not into this book up to chapter 20. I was up until the Namtia or whatever.
Yeah.
When Melior did that, I was
You were struggling.
I was really struggling, and I think I told you it was because I did not feel endeared towards Viz, and I really didn't start to honestly care about him until he saved the pup, and then also when they went back to Sus, and he starts to tell you more about what happened to his family, and the tragic loss of his sister, and he regroups with Fadric, which was an amazing scene.
Back tunnels. I did love that.
I just wish they would have given more of a glimpse of that at the beginning, like. You needed to make me feel the pain that Viz felt in that moment. And if you would have set the story up more, I would have felt more, I would have been more present with those first 19 chapters and wanted to care enough about Viz's journey. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Like,
I almost wish the prologue was like a scene.
I don't think there was a prologue.
No, that's what I'm saying. I almost wish there was a prologue where it's him in Sus.
Well, funny you
like,
should
with
mention
the
that.
hierarchy coming in.
The new book has that, I'm pretty sure. The new version of The Will of the Many has, I have not read it, but I think I saw something online. There is a prologue that talks about him fleeing Sus. which
okay. Well, then maybe that would
help.
because then now I'm a little bit more tied into him being this downtrodden orphan coming from fallen from grace. So
You
that's
get
very interesting.
Tiny glimpses of it in a couple chapters here or there, but they don't. He doesn't expand on it until the third half of the third leg of the book. You're 70% in, and then But it made me think so much of other protagonists and other fantasy books that we've read and loved. With Brandon and others, and
a true emotional connection,
dude. I mean. Think of Name of the Wind. It was that book could almost do nothing plot wise, and I loved it. I loved it, and I think a lot of people struggled with it. Whereas I was hanging on to every page because I was so raptured by.
I felt like I was walking with Quoth in every scene,
and I can't,
being there.
and you care about him, and if something happened to him, you really felt protective over him. A burgeoning like love for this character. You feel that way with Finn. You feel that way with Kelsier. You feel that way with a lot of the Brandon Sanderson books, including Kaladin. Within the first chapter or two of Way of Kings, even though we had our gripes with that book, you still felt that for him to an extent.
Yeah.
I just never got there with Viz until close to the end.
I completely agree with that.
So that's my biggest struggle.
And, at least with, like Darrow, you are emotionally connected to him
Immediately.
extremely
well,
fast.
he loses Io, and you see him losing the death of his future wife. Or I think they had already been married at that point.
Right. And then, she was pregnant or whatever, and that's what you find out.
Even worse, right? Like, that's, I think over the phone when we were talking about it, I'm like, it doesn't have to be anything crazy. It's like John Wick loses his dog. I don't care how many people kill 1 million people after that. You get free license, and I will always love you because you had that tragic loss and you made me feel it, but.
And with Viz being OP, it's just like, I'm not emotionally connected, and you're OP. It's like, well.
Wait, did we agree it was overpowered or had plot armor?
A plot armor. Plot armor.
Which, to be honest, I still don't quite understand the difference.
Because
plot is,
John Wick doesn't need something bad to happen to
He might be
himself.
overpowered.
He's OP.
Okay.
John Wick's OP.
Okay, I get
John
it.
Wick's OP. Whereas, Viz, he need an external factor has to come
like the
in.
Alupi pup.
Right.
Who saved him.
Yeah.
Or
for him to get out of danger.
Or at the very, very end when he was in the gate. Wait, run.
Right.
Yeah, you have certain things
There's
that are
an external
preserving
factor, whereas...
And the question is, why Viz? What... So I do appreciate that aspect of the story that he's the chosen one. Mm-hmm. I like the chosen one type subplot.
But even Ulciscor tells him, dude, there's a lot of you. There's smarter people than you. There's other people. I'm taking a chance on you because of whatever reason. He says something more specific, but I can't recall.
Yeah, Ulciscor is another interesting because his motive is to find his dead brother.
Right.
He's also in the military.
And also, that is something I'm excited about to figure out, Viz telling him, what the deal is. Because you don't get any closure with him.
Viz is is a true double agent at this point. He's, in maybe potentially a triple agent at some point if he starts working with Veridius.
Yeah. I'm pretty happy that he chose the neutral ground between...
Well, that was baller.
Actually, sick.
You asked me my favorite scene. It was at the very end.
Literally the last scene.
Yes. And let me find it because I wrote it down here.
And what a great tribute to Calidus, too, to join the pyramid that his dad's in.
I know. Well, and also, but that makes a lot of sense because the census data was how Calidus found out that all those students were missing.
Right, they have all the info.
All the info, yes, exactly. So it kind of made sense, but then also at the very end here, I put epic scene at end with Vis carrying Calidus's lifeless body and splitting the crowd.
Oh yeah,
there's 1 hour left, and he has the heart, the fucking heart, and he's carrying his dead friend, and he looks at Emissa, who had just attempted to murder him, and Veridius, and with pure venom says, "I'm gonna make sure you burn for this before collapsing."
So sick.
So to me, that was a very fulfilling scene where that version of this I like. You know what I mean? The version where he had to suffer through the loss of a dear friend. So, but then again, you can only get to that point after having trudged through
600
a lot
pages.
of plot.
Yeah.
So I am optimistic about book 2. I am not concerned, but I think it will be a little bit, maybe the plot could get very complicated depending on how much of this whole parallel branch reality we have to work around.
I hope he doesn't make it confusing.
Well, that's going to be the art of something like this, right? And you and I have not read a lot of sci-fi. So it's to me, this is, if book 1 is a fantasy, is book 2 a sci-fi after this? At what point when you start introducing branch realities and stuff, does this truly become a sci-fi?
Yeah.
That just happens to have and I wouldn't even call it a magic system, but there are elements of it, right? You have
can
will,
imbue something.
Yeah, you can imbue things and you can track things sort of. But I think now that we look back, people who were able to leave and come back were somehow using the gate. Like Relucia, that guy that's Relucia's point of contact, whatever that dude is. So it's not magic or will, it seems. But we might learn more about will and how it could be leveraged as a
I think because of that, it's more sci-fi than fantasy.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Something else I was interested in is I was thinking about the pyramid a little bit more because it took me a while to understand what it meant actually about the rankings where it's like
Oh, right.
precepts
Like your
and stuff.
like how powerful you are.
So apparently, there are like 3 precepts total.
Oh, the print. Yeah.
Like the
right.
number
There's
1
one of each in each pyramid.
in each pyramid.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing.
So how
Out
strong
of
those guys are.
millions of
Yeah,
people.
yeah.
I think Cottonen had how many people? Was it like 2.3 million or something, or
Oh,
maybe
when
more?
Calidus was running through the
Yeah,
data.
there's like millions of them, but I'm pretty sure there's like a handful of
And there was
precepts.
only there's only like 150
And you don't hear about any of them.
Ulciscors who's Octavus. There's like 150 of them. Like total.
Yeah, there might be.
And that's a hidden number.
Yeah, I wish we had the data on that to know for sure how many
I
there
could probably
were.
find it.
But I thought that was, as I learned more about that, like that is interesting. People's effectively their energy, their will is, as a currency almost is an very interesting concept. So I'll give him that. Like this book is not short of creativity.
No, for sure.
It's really just the storytelling. For me personally, if you had just moved a couple of key elements around, I think I would be more invested. But, there were points where I texted you, like I was like excited about the book. So there were glimpses where I was very excited, but the net sum of it did just make me feel, I kind of got to the end of it and it was like,
What did you think about the just dark academia aspect of it?
love that.
Me too. I thought he did a good job of like actual classroom and topics
And professors that were like against him and he had to like find ways around it.
like don't call it dark academia just because they're out of school. Like give me some like learning and classroom.
Yeah, I
and,
liked
like,
all that.
I like that aspect. Those
And
are some of the
that's
best scenes in Harry Potter too. Is
Yeah.
like when they're learning how to do Wingardium Leviosa. Like those are some of the best scenes when they're in the classroom. And so I thought the dark academia piece was done very well.
That was my first Dark Academia book. So yeah, I did. I really appreciated that. And I liked him. Yeah, I like somebody who, like Quoth, is so capable, right? They are the chosen one for a reason. Like his intellect is unparalleled. He basically can manipulate these professors at will if he wants to, but he doesn't quite realize his own potential yet. Like, I love that. And, his ability to work through these rankings, and that's fun for me.
Yeah.
I
would agree with
I
that.
appreciate a very intellectual protagonist.
Yeah.
Whereas Darrow was more of like a brute
Yeah.
and strategist or something. I wouldn't necessarily say that he was the intellectual, right? That's Mustang.
Right.
Mustang
Yeah.
was, whereas Viz, that's his superpower, I think, is his mind almost.
So I got, I don't know, maybe a third of the way through Babel, and same thing. He's like an Asian orphan, essentially, and extremely smart. I'm probably going to DNF it just because I think it's a little woke for me, and it's just, I don't know, not something I want to keep reading, but you might enjoy that if that's a favorite of yours.
I liked it. I will say I liked it. I don't know that Dark Academia, I wouldn't necessarily say Dark Academia is a favorite
Like a
of mine,
genre of yours.
but
yeah.
I liked it. I thought it was good.
Yeah.
It's the only one I've read. To your point, maybe if I read Babel, or didn't you say there was another one that you read that you liked, Ninth House or something?
Yeah, but that's not.
Oh.
Well, yeah, it's certainly Dark Academia, but it's totally unrelated.
Okay.
But so, what was your rating?
Okay, so we're nearing the end then of this podcast. I feel like we
I don't know. What else do you want to cover?
I don't think that there is much else to cover, really.
I have one thing. What I thought was very interesting was when Viz leaves after going through the gate and he closes the door, and some of the, I'm just going to keep referring to them as Dementors, come out, and
I call them the Walking Dead.
The Walking Dead kills them. He's also like, I don't know if we got all of them. And so I think that would be a very interesting dynamic if some of these are just out loose in the world. And what that could mean.
Well, it is interesting too. They are dead. Remember when they can only answer certain questions, and Viz kept on, when he was trialing the labyrinth, he would say, he would only say if you are dead,
Yeah.
or if you are not alive, do
If
this.
you're not alive, dead.
So
do this.
they are acting. They do not have their own agency, but they're acting on the behalf of someone else's agency or
Right.
will. So something else is manipulating them.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't understand the purpose. Like, what is the motive behind whoever's doing that?
Yeah.
Why did they? You know what I mean?
Well,
Also, why did his arm go rancid when he got bit?
and so Veridius says
'Cause he
that
lost
there
his
was
arm. He
some
woke up with
rot.
no arm,
There
poor
was
guy.
some rot to it, but I took a note of. I thought maybe Veridius took the arm off because it was proof that there was writing on it, and like there
Well,
would be
remember at
scar
the
tissue.
end, the guy gave him that Anguis.
He's like, "You're gonna lose the arm."
You're gonna lose your arm. He's like, your arm. I think he
And
even
so,
said that.
And so that was another thing that I thought about because the Alupi bites him.
He'll need to prepare
And
to lose his arm.
so if the Alupi bites him,
I don't know. He got bit by one of the Walking Dead.
oh, I thought
When
it
he
was
was fighting the
when the
Alupi.
Alupi
No, he got
pulled
bit
him
by.
out of the river.
No. Remember at the very end when he gets outside, he's swarmed by those Walking Dead, and he tries to punch a couple,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and
yeah, yeah.
thankfully he gets saved by the Alupi again.
So I'm sure that's what the rot was.
yes, the
that
bite
he's
of that
infected
thing.
by.
So that's my question: is for one, who's the one that's manipulating the will of these dead people?
Mm-hmm.
These dead people are people who tried to run the maze ostensibly, or run the labyrinth,
Right.
and failed because they give this weird.
They're
thing.
like, hey, I failed in the as a leader.
Yeah, they
of
say
the
something like,
synchronism.
I was known as Artemis Cell. I was a traitor to the commandment of isolation. I attempted to gain synchronism and remove the seal to Obiteum during the rebellion of the 7th era after the Rending. I have been lawfully condemned to certitude, guiding those who come after. I noticed sometimes they say...
Also, maybe what if Belly becomes one?
Well, exactly. Yeah, I think... yes, I think
so if
that
you
was
run
my...
it and fail.
And you fail. And something says, like, the era after the Rending. I don't know what the Rending is, but
Yeah,
I'm
we don't know
wondering if
anything
that's like
about
the
that.
Cataclysm or the Renduring. Like,
Yeah.
creating this new reality after
And
the
the
post-collapse.
7th era of the Rending.
Yes, so it's like every year maybe, or
Yeah.
we don't know how much time that means, era.
And or maybe that's the 7th Cataclysm.
Good point. Yeah, so something keeps happening. Well, we just know it's been 300 years since the last Cataclysm.
Right.
And they're continuing to try to find technology and better understand missing clues, right? Because they don't know. They're basically working with technology they don't quite understand. They're reverse engineering things that they find and whatnot.
Yeah.
Which is another interesting element of this book because you don't know what more could be found in these other realms and how that will tie back to the plot. I imagine book 2 or 3 could give us an amazing aha moment where everything that we learned in book 1 finally has sweet closure or something.
Another thing that really kind of made me mad is they have the answers to a lot of this in Nateo, who's tied to a sapper in that prison. All you got to do is get that guy out.
Well, he was just a friend of Ulciscor's, right? Or that new Caeror?
He was in the school with Caeror, and he's like, I have to get out of this, and I can give you the knowledge. But he says in
Do
there
you
that they
think
can't.
he actually knows a lot? Or that might have been a dead end? Because
I don't know, but he's saying
Okay.
he has the answers. And I think they mentioned that they can't get him out because Veridius would find out or
Yeah.
something. But also, like, why are we not trying to get that guy out of there who ostensibly has the answers?
I had something else I wanted to run by you. So this is a page where, remember when he first goes into, speaking of him, that guy, reminded me of the first time that Viz went into, it was like a similar labyrinth. There's more than one labyrinth out there. Because he went in the first one, remember? And then the second one was after he dropped in the water and found a different one, found something else. But he jumped the fence and cut his little hand. Remember when he was at the horse stable?
Yeah, but no, that wasn't a labyrinth. He just went in.
Okay, so he went downstairs in this
There's like
thing.
a temple.
Okay,
It's like a
temple. And he saw all those coffins with corpses that were had swords through their hearts.
Yeah.
Obsidian swords through their hearts. And a map was created with light once Viz touches the plate at the center of the room.
Right.
And all the voices chant in unison, Obiteum is lost.
Right. Yeah.
And it says, Obiteum is lost. Do not open the gate. Synchronous is death. Obiteum is lost. Do not open the gate. Synchronous is death. What is going on?
Yeah.
And there's all these people.
Hundreds of people lined up,
and they're
against the wall.
so
essentially.
I would think that those were people that tried to run the labyrinth, or are those people that is Veridius somehow taking students, putting them in there, and using their will to power the labyrinth. I'm just like, what is going on there, right?
Yeah. No, I kind of forgot about that part.
Obiteum is lost. And notice they're not talking about Luceum.
And who knows, man? Maybe Obiteum and Luceum are like OG, whatever leaders. And maybe it's also obviously the dimension, but also maybe it's some leaders too. I have no idea. Translation
right. Obiteum lost. Luceum unknown. That was remember the sheet of paper that Ulciscor was...
Yeah, Caeror sent him.
That Caeror sent him. Translation right. Obiteum lost. Luceum unknown. I read the first part aloud. Brow furrowed. I remember hearing you mention this to Nateo in the prison, but Obiteum and Luceum, they don't mean anything in any language I know. I move on, silent again as I check the words on the second sheet against Caeror's letter. Cinctrus exinus.
That's what he says to get into the...
That's how he got in. Gate still open. More strange pre-Cataclysm power only Veridius knows.
Yeah. Well, and there's also all of that writing in those tunnels that Viz doesn't know. So we also need clarity on what this other language
green
is.
Writing and
yeah,
stuff?
what this other language is. Because if you figure out that language, then you've got all the answers. Similar in like Way of Kings, where Dalinar starts speaking,
that other language.
The other language.
So that is very interesting. Also, I mean, in book 2 now, Caeror knows so much, obviously. So I would think we're going to get immediate satisfaction with, more of an understanding, as Viz is probably going to have a lot of questions. That Viz that's been duplicated in this other realm or split. I don't know if it's so much of like, that's scary. Does that mean that this Viz that went to this other realm and walked through that gate has all the memories of past Viz and is in a new reality, has to start over? That's terrifying.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, because, I mean, even the gate says he's duplicated. So Viz doesn't exist in those other realities until he goes into the gate.
And now he does. I guess. Well, that's what I was wondering. Does that mean the only way to seed this world with anything is to go through the gate and replicate?
Through the gate, yeah.
So what is over there? Only whoever's gone through the gate?
I guess.
Well, that's what I don't understand is this a true, is it the same, what's this world called again?
Res.
Or is that what it's like Catanon and what's the actual world called? Like, what would you...
I don't know. What is this? What does this say?
It just says the Catanon Republic.
Yeah, so I guess that's what it is. The Catanon Republic.
Son of a...
You're not a hardcover guy.
No, I'm a softcover. I just jam it. But anyways, that was what I'm wondering. Is it that same world replicated twice in two other realms, or is it just a...
Or is it just a giant pyramid that's hundreds of miles wide?
I don't know. Is it a giant labyrinth?
Well, I think because he talks about when he goes to see Melior, he sees a harbor with a bridge and then a pyramid that's hundreds of miles wide. And in one of the synchronisms, he ends up in this it's almost like kind of Mount Olympus, like where he's just up in the clouds, just like on just like a giant platform.
When was this?
In the synchronism at the end, he ends up where he's just like on a platform, like in the clouds.
I vaguely remember that. Yeah, he kind of packed a lot into the last couple of pages. But, this is... While you're looking that up, I just saw one more thing about Emissa at the very end. She says to Viz, "It was in your blood. She thought you were past saving." And then he's like, "I don't want to see her." So she did see that something was in his blood, so she knows a lot.
Yeah. Okay, here it says, "Through the shock and agony I register, I'm not in the passageway anymore. I'm lying in the middle of a vast rotunda surrounded by columns, white stone everywhere, except where I'm staining it crimson. Icy wind whips my face. There's white beyond the columns too. Snow. We're high up. Cloud-topped mountains in the distance." And then he's back in the labyrinth.
What?
Yeah. So it's almost like these worlds are not.
So it is another. It's another world. It's the same world, different.
Yeah. Or maybe it's just very small, and it's just these are like where the pyramids are of, religion and whatever. So I don't know how big these worlds are.
There's a lot to unpack. So that is what I am excited about. I will give it this. I will read book 2 because I'm so curious about Obiteum and Luceum and what's going to happen to Viz and the interplay between Viz and Res and how that's gonna, you know what I mean? Because there's gonna be these different versions of Viz that have different experiences, and then they'll have to communicate to each other to serve some larger purpose. And then you also have this sort of political unraveling that's taking place between religion, military, and governments.
Yeah, censor.
So that'll be interesting too, which does seem like less important.
Yeah.
But anywho, let's do ratings. So I think we covered a lot of ground about what we thought about this book. Who wants to go first here? I think
I always go first.
Yeah, go ahead.
6.8.
Wow.
6.8.
I was
very
rarely,
very rarely do I rate into the 6s, and the lack of emotion to the characters. I got bored in part 2. The ending was confusing. I don't want that to count against it because it's setting up the other books. It was a page turner for me, but not much more than that. 6.8.
Well, funny thing was, when I was thinking about my rating, this seems silly to give it this, but I was going to give it a 6.9.
Yeah, okay, sure.
So basically the same.
Yeah.
That was just the number that came to mind because I couldn't quite give it a 7.
And I will say, I am also trying to be a little bit more critical of books.
Oh, are you?
I'm trying to be.
Yeah, just go with
But
your
yeah,
heart.
6.8. 6.8 is where I landed.
Okay. That makes sense based off of the little bit that you and I have talked about the book. Something that we're trying to do, Plot Goblins, is Wes and I sometimes will talk too much about the book before the podcast, and it will feel a little bit less authentic during the podcast, and it's almost like we're catching you up on a conversation we already had versus having it in real time. So we did less of that this book, though I did sort of sense your lack of enthusiasm at points throughout the novel.
Yeah.
So I will say a 6.8 seems more on brand for how you actually felt.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I was going to say like 6.9 or something, but that's what we've got.
Yeah.
Emissa, that cold-hearted.
Yeah, God. What? She's the worst. What are we rating next, bud?
I think that we have agreed on this, but I got it in the mail today.
I started on my Kindle last night.
You did it! We're gonna read Warbreaker. So everybody in the comments has basically told us before we start Words of Radiance that we should read Warbreaker, and that will give us some satisfying information as it relates to the greater Cosmere and maybe play into the rest of Stormlight Archive. So
yes.
Don't read too fast though, because I started
read,
Dungeon Crawler
I read
too.
10 pages.
Okay. I could probably read Dungeon Crawler Carl and this at the same time.
Yeah, I've got stuff on my plate, so I'm not like.
But I also know once I start a Brando Sando,
yeah,
boy, don't put it down.
Well, DCC 2 will go quick for you.
Oh, so quick.
Yeah.
Dude, 100 pages in a night.
My goal is I really want to finish Warbreaker, though, by the time The Devils comes out by Joe Abercrombie, because I don't know why, I'm just itching to read that.
I know. I feel like there's no getting that off your plate.
And
look, I
it.
can't let you read the first Joe Abercrombie on a solo mission. That doesn't make sense.
Because
he's too big in fantasy for
my
us
problem
to not read
is
him
that
together.
I want to go through 2, if not 3 books before I undertake Words of Radiance.
Yeah, I'm not. I will say this:
pages.
when I was in B&N the other day, though, I did pop it open, and it started with Jasmine's perspective, and I was right back.
Yeah.
I
know that I'm gonna love it, and I think a lot of people say that's one of the best of the archive.
I will say this: I'm editing our Way of Kings Part 2 podcast right now, and the tone flip is so stark. Yeah. I mean, for how optimistic we were to how we ended.
Yeah.
I don't know if we were just having a bad day or
I
what,
don't think
but
we were having.
Man, we just bludgeoned that book bloody.
I felt bad because I was not expecting.
Well,
that.
from how we start, like people who read our first parts 1 and 2. Our first pot on it are going to think, wow, they were so into this book.
Yeah.
And then we are so lackluster.
Oh, man. Somebody posted on TikTok yesterday. It was like, please describe this book, without actually describing it. And I'm reading all the comments, and some of them are witty, and I just responded back, nothing for 800 pages.
Yeah, that's harsh. That's a
No
very
thing.
harsh.
But also, if I was going to be a little bit nicer, I would say 1,000-page prologue.
Oh, jeez, man. Well, okay, that's actually that is somewhat fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It feels like an awfully long a prologue, but all right, Plot Goblins. This was fun as always. We just did our first James Islington,
I believe.
and we may get into more. I don't know that I'm clamoring to start some of his other
No,
works.
and it doesn't come out till
He does have the
November, I think.
Licanius trilogy, which you're on record absolutely gushing over the map in that book.
Oh, yes.
So the Licanius trilogy is big though, and it's
Mm.
like we just have so much we want to read. I don't know that we're going to get back into that anytime soon.
No.
So
I'll definitely read this when it comes out, but I'm not going to read any of his other stuff until then.
and I will say this: you really want to read the Devils. I think that would be something I could get behind because it's just right now a one-off.
It's going to be a standalone.
It's going to be.
I think.
standalone.
Oh no, it is going to be a trilogy, but that's coming out May 13th, so it's going to be a while.
Okay. The only thing I saw on that book is what's the name of that? It's like it's like a superhero movie, but it's got the Joker's girlfriend, Margot Robbie plays it.
Oh, Suicide Squad.
They said a lot of the comments are like it's a Suicide Squad and a magic
and fantasy.
system.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So-
All right. Well, and I didn't love those movies, so
Well, no. Well, I think the idea is like you have this band of characters that all
anti-villains
have unique
or whatever.
capabilities, and they are all doing something on behalf of some larger governance
okay.
that's
Yeah, yeah.
steering them.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I
Yeah.
think he's like, there's a wizard, there's a this, there's a that,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
there's a
yeah,
vampire.
yeah.
I don't know. So you have this like cast of characters that all have unique capabilities that are off fighting together.
Yeah.
I think that's the concept of the Devils.
Yeah.
From the brief.
Yeah. Well, you're watching The Boys. I got to start The Boys, but like I'm hoping it's just just ragtag bad guys being the good guys.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
So
yeah,
we'll
so
see.
I would read it. Is what
I
I'm
don't know.
saying.
And who knows? Maybe I'll read the first chapter and I'm like, whatever. Because I got a lot of other books that I want to read. I really want to read Robin Hobb. I really want to read Assassin's Apprentice.
Well, we have to do that on the
Yeah,
podcast.
yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. And then Wheel of Time at some point. But
Also, look how small that Assassin's Apprentice is. We could finish that in a week. That's tiny.
Oh, dude, that's a quick book.
Yeah. I'll read that on the
It's
pooper.
430 pages and half the size.
Yeah. So,
That's
all right.
quick
Well,
read.
we've kept these people for an hour and 5 minutes. So let's go ahead and wrap up. Wes, as always, you're a gem of a human.
I love you.
I enjoy reading with you. And I enjoy your take on books. Until next
I thought
time,
this
friends.
was a good one. Well, see you guys. Goodbye.